objectives here are recognizing what COVID-19 can do to the skin, prognosticating COVID-19 severity if that's possible by skin lesions, and initiating early treatment. So I'm going to divide, and I love this particular slide. It's a little crude, but I like to divide cutaneous manifestations into, first of all, contact or irritation dermatitis, which is PPE-induced or practice-induced is what I would call it. Then things which occur directly because of the virus, things where drug-induced reactions happen, existing flares or flares of existing dermatoses, reactions to the which are particular to PPE usage, mask usage, and other equipment, and sequelae which we see after COVID-19 infection, which are all clubbed together in long COVID or post-COVID. So if you look at pool data and the number of cases allotted, the confirmed cases, 22% is the prevalence rate of mobiliform eruptions, pernio-like lesions 18%, urticarias at 16%, macular erythema is 13%, vesicular eruptions at 11%, papilloscomus diseases at under 10%, and purpura stroke, petechiae stroke ecchymosis at 6.4%. So that's kind of a prevalence rate which we can establish from studies which have already reported cutaneous manifestations. On that note, I would also want to tell you that the real number can vary far and wide depending on geographical location or demographics of the patients that we are seeing. But as a general rule, this is the prevalence rate which has been established. When I show you each condition, I'll also be discussing the incidence and prevalence rates in the form of a percentage, so you have a fair idea of how commonly you will or will not see it in your practices and institutes. So COVID-19 is best known for causing fever and respiratory symptoms. Extrapulmonary manifestations include dermatological signs which are clubbed as occurring as a preemption to COVID-19, during somebody has COVID-19, and post-COVID-19, which is clubbed as long COVID. Although at this point in time, even during the fifth wave and having seen 4 waves of COVID-19, the exact incidence still is yet to be estimated, as I told you in the last couple of slides, and the pathophysiological mechanisms of how this happens are also largely at play. So clubbing those patterns which I showed you, urticarial rash, the predominant sites involved are the trunk and the limbs. You have confluent erythematous rashes or maculopapular rashes or morbilliform eruptions. Again, the site involved here is the trunk. When papillovesicular exanthems occur, they again involve the trunk. A chilblain-like pattern is always seen on acral areas, a livedo reticularis or racemosa pattern, or even a retiform purpuric pattern, which I'll show you. These are normally seen over the lower limbs. And when you see purpuric patterns, they can be seen on the lower limbs, the upper limbs, and even in the mucosa, which I'll be showing. I'll be showing you a couple of cases also where we've had such presentations. So let's start with acute urticaria. The pool prevalence is 19%. The sites of involvement here are acral, trunk, or generalized involvement. It may or may not occur with angioedema. The pre-symptoms to urticaria could be fever, chills, myalgia, or cough. Usually the mean length of duration is 7 days, but we've had a lot of patients who then progress to chronic urticaria with this being a trigger. And I mentioned a weak temporal association with the COVID-19 vaccine. So I'll probably show you a couple of cases where COVID-19 happened post-vaccine. In fact, the lady here is a singer by profession, and she presented 14 days after she was given Covishield. So that's an association we made. I wasn't able to prove it beyond doubt, so I'll keep it at bay, but that's something which you should harbor at the back of your minds with a high degree of clinical suspicion. So I'm going to take you through another case. Vistara cabin crew presented to me with generalized wheals of 7 days duration. They were extremely itchy, and he had to take sick leave for the same. These are how the wheals look like. No rocket science there. All of us know how hives present. He did not have any angioedema. He had started self-medicating with fexofenadine 180 milligrams and calamine lotion, none of which helped. The lesions kept regressing and reappearing. They did not extend beyond 24 hours at the first time that he had presented to me. And as I mentioned, he did not present with any symptomatology of suggestive of angioedema. There was no atopic habitus, no prior urticaria, no previous drug intake preceding to the onset of urticaria, no recent infections. He did not even have COVID-19 for that matter. No food allergens, no significant medical surgical history, a teetotaler who follows a non-vegetarian, non-processed diet as far as that's possible in the industry he's in. The duration when he presented to me was of 10 days. He did have symptomatic dermographism, which we could elicit. So we did make a diagnosis of inducible urticaria at this point in time. I did not investigate him like we do for acute urticaria. Started him on belasting tablet 40 milligrams once daily. I'm fond of the double daily dose. I also proceeded to give him hydroxyzine 25 milligrams at night because he was unable to sleep. And I counseled him about the duration and nature of the course of urticaria. Cut to 7 days hence, he came back with exacerbation. These are photos that his better half clicked at home. At this point in time, you can see a distinct annularity to the lesions. The lesions were resolving in 3 to 4 hours, but I still told him, despite the dusky pH, just on the basis of how lesions looked like, we tried to dig deep into the symptomatology and I tried to rule out syndromic urticaria, could not find any other symptoms associated. He refused a biopsy, as most of our patients do in practice. I did explain to him about the remote possibility of urticarial vasculitis, even though the lesions did not heal with pH and they were resolving within 24 hours. This is the time I started him on oral cyclosporin, 3 milligram per kg per day for 4 weeks. I continued him on non-sedating and sedating antihistaminics for the time being. And provocation history was done at this stage. I could not find anything noteworthy at this point in time. So the deal breaker here was when we started him on cyclosporin, because he came back to me 7 days later. His UAS7 was much lower than before. He was sleeping better. He was flying. He resumed his daily routine, but he was moving into chronic urticaria. So at 7 weeks of duration, we established a provisional diagnosis of symptomatic dermographism with chronic urticaria. Provocation testing revealed nothing, and he was under evaluation at this point. I did ask him to get a panel of blood work done to come and see me again. On his blood work, there was nothing found. I do not consistently do an ASST in my routine practice, so I did not do that. We did test him for antithyroid peroxidase antibodies, but we could not find any. And his CBC ESR were absolutely normal. His IgE levels were high, through the roof. In fact, 922 was the level at which he had the level that we saw when we got his blood test done. So his final diagnosis was chronic spontaneous urticaria with elevated IgE levels, no detectable triggers except for the first dose of Covishield that he had taken 14 days prior to presentation. Duration, or the 2-week interval between administration of the vaccine and development of symptoms, was something that we wanted to harp upon here. He still continues to be on oral cyclosporin for 9 weeks. After that, we plan to continue him on a weekender dose at a higher dose, 5 milligram per kg per day. And we've also planned him for an anti-IgE biological in view of chronic urticaria. At this point in time, chronic spontaneous urticaria with elevated IgE levels. But why I showed you this case was just to bring about the suspicion, and maybe we'll open this for clinical discussion at some platform somewhere, that COVID-19 vaccinations now have been reported. In fact, all the vaccines that we get for COVID-19 across the globe have mentioned urticaria as a reactionary phenomenon. A lot of good papers on this as well. How much of it we see in practice, maybe we'll have to pool data together. Maybe I'll have to liaise with an institute to get better data out or to publish a good paper on this. But we leave that beyond the purview of today's presentation. Let's move on to morbilliform eruptions. 47% is the prevalence rate, one of the highest prevalences of any disorder associated with COVID-19. We've seen it, for ages associated with other viral exanthems. So why not COVID-19? I've already told you why COVID-19 would cause and could cause a maculopapular rash. You can also have purpuric lesions, P. rosea-like, pityriasis rosea-like lesions, and flexural involvement. The mean length was about 8.6 days, and no sequelae were seen after the MACPAP eruption resolved. So just to show you the other viral exanthems that we commonly see in clinical practice, you have maculopapular exanthems secondary to measles, scarlet fever, rubella, erythema infectiosum, roseola, varicella, and hand-foot mouth disease, both by Coxsackie A and by enterovirus 71. So this also follows a similar pattern where it can begin as a cephalocaudal distribution, where mostly the trunk and the extremities are involved, but it starts from the face. I'm going to show you a case from my personal kitty, a 28-year-old male, COVID positive. 14 days prior to starting of this rash, you can see beautiful collarette-like scales on dermoscopy in the second photo, and this was corroborative with COVID-19. Again, a more purpuric form of PR. A lot of good work has been done from the state of Maharashtra on pityriasis rosea. So I did dig deep and I found that purpuric PR is also common, but COVID-19, 19 days after somebody developed COVID-19, this 34-year-old male had purpuric pityriasis rosea. Let's move on to the papulovesicular eruptions. So varicella-like eruptions or vesicles have been reported. This is a case which you can see photographs on the right side. 9% is the prevalence rate as per pooled data. The case series mentions the median age between the 4th and the 6th decade of life. The delay is 3 to 14 days post-COVID, and the mean length of duration is 8 to 10 days. Again, like the others, no sequelae apart from maybe cutaneous PIH. And varicella is a marker of intermediate severity of COVID-19. So that's something to hold by. Maculopapular and urticaria both are markers of mild COVID-19, whereas varicella-like eruptions are markers of intermediate COVID-19. These are references from all the pooled data that I've shown you today. There is another dreaded complication, which I didn't know where to club this, so I'm showing it to you in this particular case. This is a patient with underlying type 2 diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and peripheral vascular disease, presented with a simple carbuncle, initially obviously a carbuncle, but by the time she presented to us, this was referred to me from an institute. She presented to me like this, so obviously I had to refer her out. We do have a plastic surgeon on board, so we did refer her out to an institute to be treated. At this stage, obviously, a patient will require surgical debridement, a pus culture, and parenteral antibiotics and admission just to be able to limit the morbidity. But this is something which patients, if they present with a history of COVID-19, with underlying immunocompromise or underlying peripheral vascular disease, do always keep necrotizing.